Hello, my dear students. Welcome back to English Mastery Hub. I'm Logan, and I'm so happy to be with you today. I hope you're excited and ready to learn something new. If you're looking to speak English confidently and naturally, you're in the right place. Today, I'm going to share with you my personal journey in learning English and the tips that truly helped me along the way. It wasn't always easy for me. I struggled with new words, grammar, and all the different rules. At times, it felt like too much to handle. But here's what I realized. I didn't need to learn everything at once. Breaking things down into smaller steps made all the difference. So, here's my first big tip. Don't try to do everything all at once. Start small and gradually build your skills. This will help you stay motivated and make steady progress. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to English Mastery Hub so you don't miss out on any lessons that will help you become a more confident English speaker. Ready? Let's dive into today's lesson. When I first started learning English, I wanted to speak perfectly right away. I wanted to learn quickly and be able to have conversations without making mistakes. But soon I realized that it doesn't work like that. Learning a language takes time. It's not something that happens overnight, and it's important to be patient with yourself. I remember feeling frustrated when I didn't improve as quickly as I wanted. There were days when I felt like I wasn't getting better, and I wondered if I would ever be able to speak fluently. I would compare myself to others who seemed to learn faster, and it made me feel discouraged. But then I learned that this feeling was normal. Everyone goes through it. The important thing is to keep going, even when it feels hard. Learning English, like learning anything new, is a process. There are times when it feels easy, and there are times when it feels difficult. Sometimes you'll learn new words quickly, and other times it might take longer to remember them. There will be moments when you understand everything in a lesson, and there will be other times when you don't understand anything at all. That's okay. It's all part of the journey. The key is not to give up, even when it feels slow or tough. One of the things that helped me be more patient was thinking about small progress. Instead of focusing on how much I still had to learn, I started celebrating the little steps I took. For example, if I learned 5 new words, I would remind myself that this was an achievement. If I understood a sentence that was difficult before, I would be proud of myself. By focusing on the progress I was making, I started to feel better about my learning. I also had to accept that making mistakes is a normal part of learning. Sometimes I would say the wrong word or make a grammar mistake, and it would frustrate me. But over time, I realized that mistakes are how we learn. Every time I made a mistake, I learned something new. If I was patient and took the time to understand why I made the mistake, I would improve. So, I learned to not be too hard on myself. Instead of getting upset, I started seeing mistakes as chances to grow. Another thing that helped me be patient was setting realistic goals. At first, I wanted to speak English perfectly and fluently right away. But I soon learned that this is not something that happens quickly. Instead, I set smaller goals that I could reach. For example, I would aim to learn 10 new words a week or practice speaking for 10 minutes every day. These small goals made learning feel less overwhelming. When I reached a goal, it felt good, and it gave me the motivation to keep going. Sometimes, I also took breaks. When I felt tired or frustrated, I would step away from studying for a while. I would listen to music, go for a walk, or do something else I enjoyed. Taking breaks helped me relax and come back to my learning with a clear mind. I realized that it's okay to take your time and that learning doesn't have to be rushed. You don't have to study for hours every day to make progress. Sometimes, a little time away can help you come back stronger and more focused. Being patient also means accepting that progress won't always be visible right away. There were weeks when I felt like I wasn't improving, and it was hard to see any change. But then, after a month or two, I would notice that I was understanding more, speaking more confidently, and making fewer mistakes. The progress is often slow at first, but it adds up over time. It's like planting a seed. At first, you don't see anything, but with time and care, it grows into something bigger. Learning a language is a journey, and it's important to enjoy the process. There will be challenges along the way, but these challenges help you grow. Every step you take, no matter how small, is progress. So, be kind to yourself and be patient. Don't worry if it takes time to learn new things. Just keep going and you'll get there. You don't have to be perfect right away. All that matters is that you keep trying and making progress every day. One of the best pieces of advice I got was to trust the process. Sometimes you might feel like you're stuck or not improving fast enough. But if you keep practicing and learning, things will start to click. Be patient with yourself, and remember that everyone learns at their own pace. It's not a race, and there's no need to rush. Just take your time, enjoy the journey, and celebrate the progress you make along the way. I know it can be hard, especially when you want to see results quickly. But remember, learning English is not about being perfect. It's about getting better little by little. If you're patient and consistent, you'll improve, and you'll be proud of how far you've come. Keep going, and trust that all your hard work will pay off in the end. When I first started learning English, I felt like I needed to learn everything all at once. There were so many words and rules, and it seemed like too much to handle. But I soon realized that the best way to begin was by focusing on the most important words, the ones I would use every day. This made learning much easier and less overwhelming. Instead of memorizing long lists of random words, I decided to focus on the words and phrases I would actually use in my daily life. I started with simple greetings. Words like hello, hi, good morning, and good evening are easy to learn and very useful. Every time I met someone or started a conversation, I could use these greetings. They were simple, but they made me feel more confident because I could start a conversation without hesitation. Next, I focused on basic questions. These are important because when you're learning a language, asking questions helps you understand what others are saying and also keeps the conversation going. Simple questions like, "How are you?" or "What's your name?" are used in almost every conversation. These types of questions are easy to learn and very useful in everyday situations. Once I knew these questions, I could ask them to practice and keep the conversation flowing. I also focused on phrases that show politeness and help me interact with others. Phrases like please, thank you, and excuse me were some of the first ones I learned. These phrases are used in many situations, whether you're asking for something, thanking someone, or getting someone's attention. By learning these simple phrases, I could make a good impression and feel more comfortable speaking in English. One of the things that really helped me was writing these words and phrases down in a notebook. I carried this notebook with me everywhere. Whenever I had a free moment, whether I was waiting in line or sitting on the bus, I would take out my notebook and review the words I had written down. This made it easy to study even when I didn't have a lot of time. I would read through the phrases and repeat them to myself, practicing how to say them correctly. Over time, I began to feel more comfortable using these words. I didn't have to think about them too much because I had practiced them so much. They started to feel natural, and I could use them without hesitation. The more I practiced, the easier it became to use these simple words and phrases in my daily life. As I started using these words more, I began to notice that people started to understand me better. I didn't need to know every word in the English language. I just needed to know the words that helped me communicate in everyday situations. This gave me the confidence to keep going and learn more. In the beginning, I focused on short, easy sentences. For example, instead of saying something complicated like, "I am feeling really tired today because I didn't sleep well last night," I would start with something simple like, "I'm tired." These simple sentences were easy to remember and helped me practice using the words I had learned. Once I felt confident using simple words and phrases, I slowly started to add more words to my vocabulary. I began to learn words that I would use in more specific situations, like when I went to a store or ordered food in a restaurant. But I didn't try to learn everything at once. I continued to focus on the words that were most useful to me. Learning these simple words and phrases helped me build a strong foundation in English. As I became more comfortable with them, I felt ready to learn new words and phrases. I didn't feel as overwhelmed because I knew I could start small and build my vocabulary step by step. If you're just starting to learn English, I recommend focusing on the words you'll use every day. Start with greetings, simple questions, and polite phrases. Write them down and review them often. The more you practice these words, the easier it will be to start speaking in English. Once you feel confident with the basics, you can begin learning more complex words and phrases. Remember, learning a new language is a process, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. By focusing on the words you'll use every day, you can start building your confidence and your ability to communicate in English. When I started learning English, I thought I had to understand every single word to improve. I would listen to English and get frustrated because I couldn't understand everything. I thought if I didn't understand all the words, it meant I wasn't learning. But later, I realized something important. Understanding every word wasn't necessary. The key was to listen as much as I could. And this made a big difference in my learning journey. Listening to English as much as possible became one of the most helpful things I did. At first, I started by listening to songs in English. I enjoyed music, so it was a fun way to practice. Even though I didn't understand all the lyrics, I still tried to pick out some words. Over time, I started recognizing familiar words and phrases. This made me feel like I was improving, and I became more excited to keep listening. Listening to music was just the start. I also started listening to podcasts in English. Podcasts are great because they cover so many topics, and there are podcasts for every level of learning. Some podcasts are for beginners, while others are for advanced learners. I started with beginner podcasts where the speakers used simple words and slow speech. Listening to these podcasts helped me hear how words are pronounced and how sentences are put together. Even if I didn't understand everything, I was still learning. Another thing that helped me was watching TV shows and movies in English. At first, I used subtitles so I could understand what was happening. But over time, I started watching without subtitles. This helped me focus on how words sounded in real conversations. I learned to pay attention to the way people speak, the rhythm of the language, and the expressions they used. It didn't feel like studying at all. It was just like watching a show I enjoyed, but I was also learning English. You don't have to understand every word to benefit from listening. The key is to listen regularly. Even if you miss some words or phrases, your brain is still picking up patterns. It's like learning to recognize pieces of a puzzle. At first, you only see a few pieces, but over time, the whole picture comes together. Listening to English also helps you get used to the natural flow of the language. In real conversations, people speak quickly and use different expressions. At first, this can feel difficult, but the more you listen, the more you get used to it. You start to recognize common phrases and words that you hear often. This helps you feel more comfortable when you speak, because you are already familiar with how the language sounds. I also found that listening to different accents and voices made a big difference. English is spoken by people from many countries, and they all have different accents. By listening to a variety of voices, I became more flexible in understanding English, no matter who was speaking. This helped me feel more confident in my listening skills, because I knew I could understand English in many different situations. Listening also gave me a chance to hear new words in context. Even if I didn't know every word, I could usually guess the meaning from the situation. For example, if someone said, "I'm so tired, I need to rest," I knew what tired meant because of the context. This is a natural way to learn new vocabulary. You don't need to memorize every word. Instead, listen carefully, and over time, you'll start to pick up new words and their meanings. Listening to English didn't feel like studying, which is what made it so enjoyable. Instead of sitting down with a textbook, I could just listen while I was doing other things. I could listen to music while I was walking, or I could play a podcast in the background while I was cleaning. This made learning feel natural, and it helped me stay motivated. It didn't feel like work, but it still helped me improve. One of the best parts about listening to English is that it helped me improve without realizing it. The more I listened, the more I started to understand. At first, I could only understand a few words, but slowly, I began to understand more and more. After a while, I was able to follow conversations and even enjoy watching TV shows in English without subtitles. This was a big accomplishment for me. So if you're learning English, my advice is to listen as much as you can. It doesn't matter if you don't understand everything at first. The important thing is to keep listening. Listen to music, podcasts, movies, or anything in English that interests you. The more you listen, the easier it will become. And the best part is, it won't feel like studying at all. It will just feel like enjoying your favorite shows, songs, and stories while you improve your English. Remember, practice doesn't have to be hard work. By listening to English regularly, you'll start to notice improvements without even realizing it. It's a fun and natural way to learn, and it will make you feel more confident in your English skills. Keep listening, and enjoy the process of learning. When I first started learning English, I was really nervous about making mistakes. I wanted to speak perfectly, and I thought if I made a mistake, people would think I wasn't good at English. This made me scared to speak at all. I was afraid of sounding silly or saying the wrong thing. But I quickly realized that mistakes are not something to be afraid of. They are part of learning. In fact, making mistakes is how you improve. The first time I tried speaking English in front of someone, I was so nervous. My heart was racing, and I was worried I would say something wrong. I kept thinking, what if they don't understand me? What if I sound silly? But I took a deep breath and tried anyway. And yes, I made mistakes. I said the wrong word, or my sentences didn't come out the way I wanted. But you know what? The person I was speaking to didn't judge me. They smiled and tried to help me understand better. That experience taught me something very important. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, it's normal. Nobody speaks perfectly all the time, not even native speakers. Everyone makes mistakes when they speak, and that's how we learn and get better. The key is not to let your mistakes stop you from speaking. Instead of being afraid of making mistakes, I started to see them as a chance to learn. Every time I made a mistake, I took a moment to think about it. What went wrong? I asked myself. What could I say differently next time? This way, I learned from each mistake. Slowly, I started to make fewer mistakes, but even when I made one, I didn't let it discourage me. I just kept practicing and speaking more. The more I spoke, the better I got, and the fewer mistakes I made. I also realized that when you speak, people don't always focus on your mistakes. They care more about the message you are trying to share. If you are speaking clearly and trying your best, people will understand you, even if you make a mistake. In fact, most people appreciate it when someone is trying to speak their language. They understand that learning a new language is hard, and they are happy that you are making the effort. One thing I did to overcome my fear of making mistakes was to remind myself that nobody is perfect. It helped me to think of mistakes as part of the learning process, not something to be ashamed of. Every mistake is an opportunity to improve. Even when I made a big mistake, I knew it was okay. It was just one step closer to getting better. As I continued to practice speaking English, I became less afraid of making mistakes. I started speaking more confidently, even if I wasn't 100% sure of the words I was using. I understood that mistakes would happen, but that didn't mean I wasn't improving. Every time I spoke, I got better. One of the most helpful things for me was practicing speaking with friends or language partners. When I spoke with other people who were also learning English, I felt more comfortable making mistakes. We were all learning together, so it felt like a safe space to practice without fear of judgment. We made mistakes, corrected each other, and learned from them. This helped me build more confidence in my speaking skills. If you're nervous about speaking English and making mistakes, I want to tell you something important. Don't let fear hold you back. Mistakes are part of the process, and the only way to improve is by speaking and practicing. The more you speak, the more comfortable you will become. And the more mistakes you make, the faster you will learn. So instead of worrying about making mistakes, focus on speaking and practicing as much as you can. It's also helpful to remind yourself that everyone makes mistakes. Even if you hear someone speak perfect English, They have made mistakes too. They have just learned from them and kept going. The same is true for you. Every time you make a mistake, you are learning and improving. Another important lesson I learned is that it's okay to ask for help when you don't know something. If you don't understand a word or you're not sure how to say something, just ask. People will be happy to help you. And if you don't ask, you might continue to make the same mistake over and over. Asking questions and getting feedback is a great way to learn. So, if you're afraid of making mistakes, try to change your mindset. See mistakes as opportunities to grow. When you make a mistake, don't get discouraged. Instead, think about what you can learn from it. The more you practice and speak, the more confident you will become. And one day, you'll look back and realize how far you've come, all because you didn't give up after making mistakes. Remember, learning a language is a journey. There will be ups and downs, and mistakes are just part of that. Don't be afraid of them. Embrace them, learn from them, and keep going. You're doing great, and every step you take brings you closer to speaking English confidently. Keep practicing, and don't let the fear of mistakes stop you from speaking. When I started learning English, I realized that being consistent was very important. I knew I couldn't learn everything in one day, but if I practiced a little every day, I would improve over time. So, I made a plan to practice English every single day. Even if it was just for 15 minutes, I made sure to do something in English. Some days I had a lot of time, so I practiced for an hour or more. On other days, I was busy and could only practice for 10 or 15 minutes. But I didn't let that stop me. Even doing a small amount every day made a big difference. It's like planting a seed and watering it a little bit every day. Over time, the seed grows into a strong tree. That's how I saw learning English. I didn't always do the same thing every day. Sometimes I practiced speaking. I would talk to myself in English or practice with a friend or language partner. Other times I would listen to English songs, podcasts, or videos. Listening helped me a lot because it improved my understanding of how people speak naturally. I also practiced reading simple books or articles and writing short sentences or messages in English. The key was to keep going, even when I felt tired or didn't have much time. I learned that it's better to do a little bit every day than to do a lot one day and then nothing for the rest of the week. By practicing every day, I stayed connected to the language, and it became a part of my daily life. One thing that helped me stay consistent was setting a goal. My goal was to practice for at least 15 minutes every day. I knew this was a small and easy goal, so it wasn't hard to stick to it. Some days, I ended up practicing for much longer because I enjoyed it so much. But even on busy days, I could still find 15 minutes to practice. I also created a routine. For example, I practiced English at the same time every day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes before bed. Having a routine made it easier to remember to practice. It became a habit, just like brushing my teeth or eating breakfast. Over time, I didn't even have to think about it. I just did it automatically. Another thing that helped me stay consistent was using tools and resources that I enjoyed. I loved listening to English music, so I added that to my daily practice. I would listen to a song and try to understand the words. I also watched TV shows and movies in English. This made learning fun, and it didn't feel like hard work. The more fun it was, the easier it was to keep practicing every day. Sometimes I would write down what I did in a notebook. For example, if I practiced speaking for 10 minutes, I would write, "Spoke English for 10 minutes today." If I listened to a podcast, I would write, "Listen to 15 minutes of an English podcast." Writing it down helped me see my progress and reminded me to stay consistent. There were days when I didn't feel like practicing, but I reminded myself why I wanted to learn English. I wanted to be able to speak with people, travel, and understand movies and books in English. Thinking about my goals gave me the motivation to keep going, even on days when I didn't feel like it. I also told my friends and family about my goal to practice English every day. They supported me and encouraged me to keep going. Sometimes they even practiced with me, which made it more fun. Having support from others helped me stay consistent. Another thing I did was track my progress. I would look back at where I started and see how much I had improved. For example, at the beginning, I could only say a few simple sentences. But after practicing consistently for a few months, I could have short conversations. Seeing my improvement made me feel proud and motivated me to keep going. If you want to stay consistent, here are some tips that worked for me. 1. Set a small daily goal. Decide how much time you want to spend on English each day. Even 10 or 15 minutes is enough to make progress. 2. Create a routine. Practice at the same time every day so it becomes a habit. 3. Mix it up. Do different activities like speaking, listening, reading, and writing so you don't get bored. 4. Use fun resources. Find things you enjoy, like songs, videos, or books in English, to make learning more enjoyable. 5. Track your progress. Write down what you do each day and look back at how far you've come. 6. Find support. Tell your friends or family about your goal. They can encourage you and even practice with you. 7. Stay motivated. Remember why you want to learn English. Think about your goals and how learning English will help you achieve them. Consistency is the secret to learning any new skill, including English. By practicing every day, even just a little, you will see steady improvement. Don't worry about being perfect or learning everything all at once. Focus on taking small steps every day, and over time, you'll make big progress. I know it's not always easy to stay consistent, but trust me, it's worth it. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become. And one day, you'll look back and see how much you've improved, all because you stayed consistent and didn't give up. Keep going. You've got this. When I first started learning English, one of the biggest challenges was speaking. I felt nervous and unsure of myself. I was afraid I might say something wrong, and I didn't want to make mistakes. But I soon realized that the only way to get better at speaking was to practice. So, I started speaking out loud, even if no one was around to listen. At first, I practiced by talking to myself. It might sound a little strange, but it really helped me. I would say simple sentences or repeat new words I had learned. For example, if I learned a new word, I would say it out loud many times until it felt natural. This helped me remember the word better, and it made me more comfortable with speaking. One of the most important things I learned was that practice makes perfect. The more I spoke, the easier it became. In the beginning, my pronunciation wasn't very good, and sometimes I didn't know how to say certain words. But I didn't let that stop me. I kept practicing every day. I repeated words over and over, and slowly, my pronunciation started to improve. I could feel myself getting more confident. I also started using online dictionaries. Many online dictionaries have a feature where you can listen to how a word is pronounced. I would use this feature a lot to make sure I was saying the word correctly. If I wasn't sure about the pronunciation, I would listen to the word again and try to repeat it exactly as I heard it. This helped me understand how the sounds were made and how to say the words correctly. Another thing I did was practice speaking in front of a mirror. I would look at myself while I was speaking, and I would try to speak clearly and confidently. Sometimes it helped to watch my mouth move and pay attention to how I was pronouncing the words. It felt a little silly at first, but it really helped me improve. By seeing myself speak, I could notice areas where I needed to improve, and I could work on them. I didn't just practice by repeating words. I also practiced using them in sentences. For example, if I learned the word apple, I wouldn't just say apple over and over. I would say things like, I want an apple, or the apple is red. This helped me practice using the words in real sentences, and it helped me get used to speaking in English more naturally. The more I practiced speaking these sentences, the easier it became to speak in full conversations. Another helpful tip was to practice with a language partner. I found someone who was also learning English, and we would practice together. We would speak in English for a few minutes, and then switch to our native languages for a few minutes. This way, we could both practice speaking English, and we didn't feel as nervous. Having a partner helped me feel more comfortable because I knew we were both learning and we could help each other. Speaking with a partner also helped me learn new phrases and expressions. For example, if I didn't know how to say something, my partner would help me, and I would remember that phrase for the next time. It was a great way to learn how to speak more naturally and improve my conversation skills. I also tried to listen to native English speakers as much as possible. I would watch movies, TV shows, or YouTube videos in English. When I heard new words or phrases, I would try to repeat them aloud. This helped me get used to the rhythm and flow of the language. Listening to native speakers gave me a good example of how English sounds in real conversations, and it helped me improve my own speaking. Sometimes I practiced speaking with myself in different situations. For example, I would pretend I was ordering food at a restaurant, or I would imagine I was meeting someone for the first time. By practicing different situations, I was able to prepare myself for real-life conversations. Even though I was just imagining the situation, it helped me feel more ready when the time came to actually speak. At first, it felt uncomfortable to speak out loud. But the more I practiced, the easier it became. Speaking English every day helped me become more confident, and over time, I noticed that I made fewer mistakes. I also noticed that I could understand English better when I spoke it. I could communicate more easily, and I felt proud of my progress. One of the most important things I learned was not to be afraid of making mistakes. When I started practicing speaking, I made a lot of mistakes. But each mistake was a chance for me to learn. If I said something wrong, I would correct myself and try again. It didn't matter if I made mistakes. What mattered was that I kept practicing and kept improving. Over time, I became more comfortable with speaking. I could say simple things without thinking too much. I could order food at a restaurant, ask for directions, and talk to people in English. Speaking became easier. and I didn't feel as nervous as I did before. I was learning to trust myself and my ability to speak English. So, if you want to improve your speaking, I encourage you to practice out loud every day. It doesn't matter if you're speaking to yourself or with a partner. What matters is that you're speaking. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just keep speaking, and you'll see improvement. Remember, the goal is to communicate. The more you speak, the better you'll get at understanding and using English. So, start practicing today, and soon, speaking English will feel as natural as speaking your native language. When I first started learning English, there were many things I didn't understand. I would hear words or phrases, and I had no idea what they meant. Sometimes I would get confused by grammar rules, or I would not know how to say something correctly. At first, I was a little shy about asking questions. I didn't want to feel like I was bothering anyone, and I was worried about making mistakes. But soon, I realized something important. Asking questions is the best way to learn. If I didn't ask, I would keep being confused and I wouldn't improve. So, I started to ask more questions, and it made a huge difference in my learning journey. The first time I asked a question in English, I felt nervous. I wasn't sure if I was asking it the right way or if the other person would understand me. But I asked anyway, and I was surprised by how helpful people were. Most of the time, they were happy to answer, and it helped me understand the language better. I learned that people don't mind answering questions, and they want to help you learn. In fact, asking questions can show that you are interested in learning and improving. It can also help you build stronger connections with others, as they will see that you are eager to learn. When I didn't understand a word or phrase, I asked what it meant. For example, if I heard a new word while listening to a conversation, I would stop and ask, "What does that word mean?" Or if I was reading a book and came across a sentence I didn't understand, I would ask for an explanation. Sometimes I would ask the person I was talking to, and other times I would look it up in a dictionary or ask my teacher. The more I asked, the more new words I learned. This helped me improve my vocabulary and understand more of what I was hearing or reading. Another important thing I realized is that asking questions about grammar can also help you improve. When I didn't understand a grammar rule, I would ask about it. For example, I once didn't understand when to use he is and when to use he's. So I asked my teacher to explain it. She gave me a simple answer that made everything clearer. Sometimes grammar rules can be tricky, but by asking questions, I was able to understand them better. Over time, I became more confident with grammar because I wasn't afraid to ask questions when I didn't understand something. Asking questions also helped me improve my speaking skills. When I was unsure about how to say something, I would ask someone if it was correct. For example, if I wanted to say something in a sentence but wasn't sure about the word order, I would ask, "Is this the right way to say it?" The more I asked, the more I started to feel confident in my speaking. I learned how to use the language more naturally and correctly by practicing with others and asking questions. One of the things I love about asking questions is that it helps you learn from others. People who are more experienced in English can give you valuable advice and tips. They can correct your mistakes and teach you things you might not know. Asking questions helps you take advantage of the knowledge others have. It's like having a teacher everywhere you go. And even if you make mistakes while asking questions, that's okay. Mistakes are part of the learning process. The important thing is that you are asking and trying to improve. If you're ever in doubt, remember that it's always better to ask than to stay confused. There is no shame in asking questions, and it can make a big difference in your progress. The more questions you ask, the more you will learn, and the more confident you will become. Even if you don't get the perfect answer right away, asking questions will help you move closer to understanding. Sometimes, asking questions can also help you connect with other learners. If you ask a question in a group or class, other students might have the same question. By asking, you not only help yourself, but also help others who might be struggling with the same thing. This creates a positive learning environment where everyone can grow together. You can also share your own answers and tips with others, creating a helpful and supportive learning community. In addition to asking about words and grammar, it's also important to ask about cultural differences. Learning a language isn't just about words and rules. It's also about understanding the culture behind the language. I remember asking about certain customs and expressions in English, and it helped me understand the language on a deeper level. For example, I asked why people use certain phrases or what they mean in different situations. This helped me avoid misunderstandings and use the language more naturally in different contexts. Asking questions is not only about improving your skills, but also about gaining confidence. At first, I was shy and afraid of asking questions, but as I practiced more, I became more comfortable. Asking questions became a normal part of my learning process. I didn't feel embarrassed anymore. I learned that asking questions shows that I am actively involved in my learning, and it's a sign of curiosity and a desire to improve. Over time, I became more confident in my ability to speak and understand English. So, if you ever feel stuck or unsure about something, don't be afraid to ask questions. Whether it's about a word, a grammar rule, or something cultural, asking will help you grow. Remember, everyone was a beginner once, and asking questions is one of the best ways to learn. Keep asking, keep learning, and soon you will see how much you've improved. Don't let shyness stop you from getting the answers you need. Keep asking questions, and you'll keep moving forward on your journey to mastering English. When I started learning English, I was shy about speaking. I worried about making mistakes or saying something wrong. But then I realized that speaking is one of the best ways to improve. The more you practice, the better you get. So I decided to make speaking a daily habit. At first, I practiced alone. I would stand in front of a mirror and talk to myself. I would say simple things like, "Good morning, how are you?" or "Today is a sunny day." It felt strange at first, but it really helped me build confidence. I could see my expressions and hear my voice, which made me more aware of how I was speaking. I also started repeating words and sentences out loud. For example, if I learned a new word, I would say it several times. Apple, apple, apple. Then I would try to use it in a sentence, "I like eating an apple." Repeating words helped me remember them better, and it made speaking feel more natural. Listening to how words are pronounced was another important step. I used online dictionaries and language apps that had audio examples. I would listen to a word, pause, and then repeat it. Sometimes, I would play the word several times to make sure I was pronouncing it correctly. This was very helpful for words that were difficult to say. To make speaking more fun, I used songs and movies. I would sing along to my favorite English songs, even if I didn't know all the words. Singing helped me improve my pronunciation and rhythm. Watching movies and repeating lines from the characters also helped. Sometimes, I would pause the movie, repeat what a character said, and try to match their tone and accent. When I felt more confident, I started speaking with other people. I found language exchange partners online and joined English conversation groups. At first I was nervous, but everyone was very kind and supportive. They didn't laugh at my mistakes. Instead, they encouraged me to keep trying. Speaking with real people helped me improve faster because I could ask questions and learn new words and phrases. I also tried to speak English in my daily life. For example, if I went to a restaurant, I would order in English. If I met someone new, I would introduce myself in English. These small moments gave me real-life practice and made me feel more comfortable using the language. Sometimes, I recorded myself speaking. I would talk about my day, describe my favorite food, or explain something I learned. Then, I would listen to the recording to hear how I sounded. This helped me notice areas where I could improve, like pronunciation or sentence structure. One thing I learned is that it's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are a natural part of learning. Every time I made a mistake, I learned something new. For example, if I used the wrong word or grammar, someone would correct me, and I would remember it for the future. The important thing is to keep trying and not give up. Here are some tips that helped me practice speaking. 1. Start small. Practice simple sentences and short conversations. Don't worry about being perfect. Just focus on speaking. 2. Talk to yourself. Use a mirror or practice alone in a quiet place. This helps you build confidence before speaking with others. 3. Repeat new words. Say new words out loud several times and try to use them in sentences. 4. Use audio tools. Listen to how words are pronounced and repeat them. Online dictionaries and language apps are great for this. 5. Sing and watch movies. Sing along to songs and repeat lines from movies. This makes practice fun and improves your pronunciation. 6. Find a speaking partner. Join language exchange groups or find someone to practice with. Speaking with others helps you learn faster. 7. Record yourself. Talk about anything and listen to the recording. This helps you notice areas for improvement. 8. Be patient. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Every mistake is a step toward improvement. Speaking English became easier the more I practiced. At first, it felt difficult and uncomfortable, but over time, it became natural. The key is to keep going and never stop trying. You'll see progress little by little, and one day, you'll feel confident speaking English anywhere. Keep practicing and don't give up. When I first started learning English, I had a big challenge. I always translated everything from my native language to English in my head. If I wanted to say something, I would think about how to say it in my language first and then try to translate it to English. This was a big problem because it took a lot of time, and sometimes I would forget the right words or make mistakes. It made speaking English slower and more difficult, and I didn't feel confident. But one day, I realized something important. To speak English more easily, I needed to stop translating every word. I needed to think directly in English, just like a native speaker does. It wasn't easy at first. It felt strange and uncomfortable, but I kept practicing, and over time, it started to get easier. I want to share with you how I started thinking in English and how it helped me improve my language skills. At the beginning, I started with simple thoughts. For example, when I was at home, I would say to myself, "I'm hungry," or "I need to go to the store." These were simple ideas, but instead of thinking in my native language, I tried to think them in English. At first, it felt unnatural, but I kept practicing, and I started to feel more comfortable with it. Little by little, I began to think in English for other things too, like, "It's a nice day," or "I should study now." Even simple thoughts like these helped me practice thinking in English. The key was to practice these small thoughts every day. At first, I would think in English for only a few seconds, but over time, I could think in English for longer periods. I didn't need to translate everything. I just thought directly in English, and this made speaking and understanding English much easier. Instead of pausing to think about the right words, I was able to speak more naturally and quickly. As I kept practicing, I started to think in English during everyday activities. For example, when I was cooking, I would think about the steps in English. Instead of saying, "I need to put the rice in the pot," I would think, "I need to put the rice in the pot." This made learning feel less like studying and more like a part of my everyday life. Every time I thought in English, it felt like a small victory. Thinking in English also helped me improve my vocabulary. As I practiced, I started to remember new words faster. Instead of searching for a word or translating from my language, I began to use the English words I had learned without thinking too much. This made me feel more confident, and my sentences became smoother and more natural. Another benefit of thinking in English is that it helped me understand the language better. When I thought in English, I started to see how the words and sentences worked together. I could understand the structure of English better because I was not just translating words, but also understanding how the language flows. This made speaking and listening easier too. I also noticed that thinking in English helped me become more creative with the language. When I didn't translate everything, I started to use the words I knew in new ways. For example, if I didn't know the exact word for something, I would try to explain it using different words. I might say, "It's a place where you buy food," if I didn't know the word supermarket. This made me feel more comfortable speaking even if I didn't know every word. I want to tell you that thinking in English takes time, and it's okay if it's difficult at first. It's completely normal to feel uncomfortable or unsure, but the more you practice, the easier it will become. You don't need to force yourself to think in English all the time. Start with small moments, like when you're alone or doing something simple. Try to think in English during your day-to-day activities, and don't worry if it's not perfect. One of the best ways to improve your ability to think in English is to surround yourself with the language. Watch English movies or TV shows, listen to English podcasts, or read simple books in English. The more you hear and see the language, the more you will start to think in English without realizing it. This exposure helps your brain get used to the language, and over time, it will feel more natural to think in English. Another way to practice thinking in English is by speaking with others in English. Find a language exchange partner or practice with a friend. The more you speak, the more you will have to think in English. Don't worry if you make mistakes. That's part of the process. The important thing is that you are practicing and getting better. Thinking in English also means that you can start to dream in English. This might sound strange, but it's a great sign that you are becoming more comfortable with the language. When you start dreaming in English, it means that your brain is thinking in English during your sleep as well. It shows that you've reached a level where the language is becoming a natural part of your life. In the beginning, thinking in English can feel like a big challenge. It might feel strange, and you might want to go back to translating everything. But I encourage you to keep going. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't worry if it takes time. The more you practice thinking in English, the better you will get. It will help you speak more naturally and understand the language more easily. Remember, learning English is a journey, and thinking in English is just one step along the way. Keep practicing, and you will see the progress. Over time, thinking in English will become a habit, and speaking English will feel much easier. You're doing great, so keep going. When I first started learning English, I realized that practicing speaking was one of the most important things I needed to do. But there was a problem. I didn't have many people around me who could speak English. I felt a bit nervous because I didn't know how to practice speaking. I knew I needed to speak more to improve, but I wasn't sure how. That's when I found out about something called a language exchange partner. This was one of the best things I did in my learning journey. A language exchange partner is someone who wants to learn your language, and in return, you help them with your language. In my case, I wanted to learn English, and my partner wanted to learn my native language. We would take turns practicing. Sometimes we would speak in English, and other times we would speak in our native languages. It was like having a fun conversation while helping each other learn. At first I was a little nervous. I wasn't sure if I was ready to speak with someone else, especially in English. What if I made too many mistakes? But I quickly realized something important. Mistakes are part of learning. My language exchange partner was very patient with me. They didn't mind if I made mistakes, and they would gently correct me when I needed it. This made me feel much more confident. I didn't feel as afraid to speak because I knew my partner understood I was still learning. The best part about having a language exchange partner was that I got to practice real conversations. I wasn't just repeating phrases from a book. I was having actual conversations like I would with a friend. This helped me get used to hearing and speaking English in a natural way. I learned new words and expressions that you don't always find in textbooks. Sometimes we would laugh at funny mistakes, and other times we would teach each other new things. It was a fun and supportive way to learn. I also learned that having a language exchange partner helped me in many ways. For one, I practiced listening. When my partner spoke, I had to listen carefully to understand them. This helped improve my listening skills. Listening to someone else speak was also great for getting used to different accents and ways of speaking. It was like listening to real-life English, not just the perfect sentences in a textbook. Speaking with my partner also helped me get better at thinking in English. At first, I would translate everything in my head from my native language to English. But as I kept practicing, I began to think directly in English. This made me speak more quickly and naturally. I didn't have to pause and think about every word. The more I practiced, the easier it became. We didn't always just talk about grammar or vocabulary. Sometimes we would talk about our lives, our cultures, or things we like to do. This made the learning process more fun and interesting. It wasn't just about memorizing rules. It was about connecting with someone else and sharing ideas. This made learning feel more personal and exciting. If you're worried about not finding a language exchange partner, don't worry. There are many websites and apps where you can find someone to practice with. Some of them are free and some offer paid services, but you can start with free options. All you need is a phone or a computer, and you can find someone to practice with from anywhere in the world. There are also groups on social media where you can connect with language learners. Another good thing about language exchange is that it helps you learn more than just the language. You can learn about different cultures and traditions. It helps you see the world from a new perspective. Sometimes I would learn about my partner's culture, and they would learn about mine. This made our conversations even more interesting. At the beginning, you might feel shy or nervous about speaking with someone in English. But remember, everyone is learning. Your language exchange partner is probably just as nervous as you are. Don't worry if you make mistakes. It's okay. What matters is that you are practicing and you are improving. Over time, you will feel more comfortable and confident. One of the best things about having a language exchange partner is that it gives you someone to talk to. You don't have to wait for a class or a lesson to practice. You can speak whenever you want. You can practice speaking as much as you like, and it doesn't cost anything. The more you practice, the better you will get. Your language exchange partner will help you stay motivated and keep you going. Another benefit of having a partner is that it helps you stay on track. Sometimes learning a language can feel lonely or boring, especially if you are studying alone. But when you have a partner, you have someone to talk to, someone who encourages you. You both work together, and it makes learning feel like a fun challenge. You can help each other improve. If you don't have a language exchange partner yet, I really encourage you to find one. It was one of the best decisions I made in my learning journey. It helped me improve my speaking, listening, and confidence. Plus, it was a great way to make a new friend from another part of the world. So, look for a partner today. You'll see how much it can help you in your language learning. And remember, practice makes perfect. So the more you practice, the better you will get. Having a language exchange partner isn't just about learning the language. It's also about building connections and making the learning process more enjoyable. It helped me grow not just as a language learner, but also as a person. So, if you get the chance to practice with someone else, take it. It will help you become a better speaker and make learning more exciting. When I first started learning English, grammar felt like a big problem. Every time I tried to speak or write, I would make mistakes. I would worry about the rules and feel nervous. It felt like I had to know all the grammar rules perfectly to speak well. But over time, I learned something important that helped me a lot. It's okay not to be perfect at grammar. I know this might sound strange, but it's true. The most important thing is to communicate. When you speak or write, you just need to make sure the other person understands you. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes in grammar. People will still understand your message if you keep it simple. At first, I was afraid to speak because I didn't think my grammar was perfect. I would hesitate, and sometimes I didn't speak at all. But then I realized something very helpful. You can still be understood even if your grammar isn't perfect. This is the big lesson I learned. So I stopped focusing so much on making everything perfect. Instead, I focused on being clear. I used simple sentences and didn't worry too much about the rules. This made it much easier to speak and write. Over time, my grammar got better. I learned from my mistakes, and I kept practicing. But the most important thing was that I wasn't afraid to speak or make mistakes anymore. This helped me move forward. I want to share this tip with you because I think it can really help you. Don't worry about being perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, making mistakes is a natural part of learning. When you make a mistake, you can learn from it and get better. The goal is to communicate. If you are trying to say something and you make a mistake, don't worry. The other person will understand you. You don't have to know every rule. When I first started, I would use very simple sentences. For example, instead of saying something complicated like, "I would have liked to visit the museum if I had time," I would say, "I want to go to the museum." It was simple, but it worked. People understood me. As time went on, I started to add a little more detail and I learned how to use more complicated grammar. But even now, I still don't worry about making every sentence perfect. I want you to know that you don't need to be afraid of grammar. Everyone makes mistakes, even people who speak English as their first language. The most important thing is to keep practicing and trying. When you make a mistake, just keep going. You will get better little by little. The more you practice, the more your grammar will improve naturally. Think of learning grammar like building a house. You don't start by putting the roof on. First, you build the walls, and then you add the roof. If you try to focus on perfect grammar from the beginning, it's like trying to build the roof before the walls. Instead, focus on learning the basics. Start by speaking in simple sentences and getting your ideas across. Later, you can add more complicated grammar to make your speaking and writing more interesting. I also found that listening and reading a lot helped me with grammar. When I listened to other people speaking English, I would hear how they used simple sentences. Then, over time, I started to understand how they used more complicated grammar too. This was a great way for me to learn. It helped me get used to the way English is spoken. Reading was another great way to learn. I would read simple books at first. As my English improved, I read more complex books. Every time I read, I learned new words and grammar. I didn't worry if I didn't understand everything at first. I kept reading, and with time, I understood more and more. Remember, you are learning a new language. It's normal to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to speak, even if you're not sure about the grammar. If you focus too much on grammar, you might stop yourself from speaking altogether. And that's not the goal. The goal is to practice, to communicate, and to get better every day. When I started to speak more, I found that people didn't care so much about my grammar. They cared about what I was saying. They wanted to understand my message. So I became more confident. I didn't let mistakes hold me back. The more I practiced, the easier it became. And I started to make fewer mistakes over time. Now, I want you to remember something very important. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not have perfect grammar. As long as people understand you, that's what matters. The more you practice, the better your grammar will become. But don't let it stop you from speaking. Keep practicing, and you'll improve bit by bit. When I started learning English, I thought I had to be perfect. But over time, I realized that I didn't need to be perfect to speak well. Now I'm much more confident in my English. I keep practicing, and I keep learning from my mistakes. And I want you to know that you can do this too. The most important thing is to speak and practice as much as you can. If you make a mistake, just keep going. Don't worry about it too much. The more you practice, the better you will get. And remember, the goal is to communicate. That's what really matters. When I first started learning English, it felt like a big challenge. I didn't know where to begin, and everything seemed so hard. But then I realized something important. Small steps can make a big difference. I want to share how setting small goals and enjoying the process helped me succeed. One of the first things I learned was to set small goals. Instead of thinking about becoming fluent right away, I focused on small, simple tasks. For example, I decided to learn 10 new words each week. I wrote these words in a notebook and practiced them every day. Sometimes I used flashcards or apps to help me remember them. By the end of the week, I could use these words in sentences. It made me feel proud and gave me the confidence to keep going. Another small goal I set was to have short conversations in English. At first, it was just a 1-minute chat with someone. I would say things like, "Hello, how are you?" or "What's your name?" It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Over time, I increased the length of my conversations. First to 2 minutes, then 5 minutes. Each time I practiced, I felt a little more comfortable. I also made small reading goals. I started with very simple books and articles. For example, children's books were great because the sentences were short and easy to understand. I would read 1 page a day and underline words I didn't know. Then, I looked them up and tried to use them in my writing or speaking. Reading a little every day helped me improve my vocabulary and understand sentence structure. Another thing that helped was focusing on daily habits. Instead of practicing for hours on one day, I practiced for 15 to 20 minutes every day. It could be listening to an English podcast, writing a few sentences in a journal, or watching a short video. These small, consistent habits made learning less stressful and more enjoyable. As I learned more, I realized that it's important to enjoy the process. Learning English doesn't have to feel like work. It can be fun. I found ways to make it interesting by including things I love. For example, I enjoy music, so I started listening to English songs. At first, I couldn't understand all the words, but I would look up the lyrics and sing along. It was fun, and it helped me learn pronunciation and new phrases. I also love video games. Many games have characters that speak in English, so I started playing games in English instead of my native language. It felt natural to pick up new words and phrases while playing. It didn't feel like studying. It felt like having fun. Watching movies and TV shows was another way I made learning fun. I started with subtitles in my native language, then switched to English subtitles. Eventually, I watched without subtitles. I learned so much about how people talk in real life, expressions, slang, and tone. Plus, it didn't feel like a lesson. It was something I enjoyed. Celebrating small successes was also very important. Every time I reached a goal, no matter how small, I celebrated. For example, when I learned 50 new words or finished a short book, I rewarded myself with something I liked, a treat, a break, or watching my favorite show. These small celebrations kept me motivated. Looking back on my journey, I can see how far I've come. There were times when I felt like giving up, but I reminded myself that every small step was bringing me closer to my goal. It's amazing to think about the progress I've made. I can now have long conversations, read books, and even share my story in English. If you're just starting your English journey, here are some tips that helped me. 1. Set small goals. Break your learning into small, manageable tasks. Focus on learning a few words, reading one page, or having a short conversation. 2. Practice daily. Spend a little time every day practicing. Even 15 minutes can make a big difference. 3. Enjoy what you do. Find fun ways to learn, like listening to songs, watching shows, or playing games in English. 4. Celebrate your progress. Reward yourself for reaching small goals. It will keep you motivated and make learning more enjoyable. 5. Be patient. Learning a language takes time. Don't rush, and don't compare yourself to others. Focus on your own progress. The most important thing is to remember that learning English is a journey. It's not about being perfect. It's about improving little by little. You don't have to know everything right away. Just take one step at a time and you'll get there. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to keep going and enjoy the process of learning English. You can do it. Keep practicing, have fun, and never give up. You're closer to success than you think. Keep going, and good luck on your English journey.